Just going to start recording now, everyone. Welcome everyone to Aotearoa Conversations Session. This session here is why measurement of social value can inform social enterprise implementation. We've got our facilitators here, Chris and Siha from, this here will, the format of this session today will be a video and then there'll be a discussion based on that topic. I'll just hand over now to our facilitators. Chris, if I could get you to start first, that would be great. Thank you.
Kia ora, Tan, thank you. Ngā mihi mahana kia koutou. I'm coming to you today from Te Wai Pounamu. Normally I'm based in Wellington, but I'm over in sunny Nelson, just about to kick off the school holidays with family. Ko Sugarloaf, te moanga, ko te whanganui atara, te moana, ko O'Neill, te iwi, no Island o, ko Glendalough, te Turanga Waiwai, ko Chris, toku ingoa, ko te Ākina Foundation, taku mahi. I'm really excited to be on this session and to have Sneha here with me. Really excited about the conversation we're all going to have. Kia ora.
E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā karanga maha o te motu, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Sneha na koutia toku ingoa, no inya auho, ingari ke tamaki makaurua no mo ana. Kia ora koutou. My name is Sneha. I have been working in the social impact space for more than 10 years with different agencies across the spectrum, government agencies, not-for-profits, as well as corporates. I wear multiple hats. Today, I'm just representing myself and on behalf of Social Value Aotearoa, and looking forward for the conversations today. I think it's going to be really exciting. Thank you.
Fabulous, thank you very much. What we'll do now is we'll go straight into the video and we'll see each other back here at around 11 o'clock. Probably a good time now if you could just mute yourself as well. Thank you very much. See you back here.
Yeah, fantastic. Sneha, one of the parts that really interested me was this question of how rigorous do you need to be when you're thinking of impact, and maybe you could share a little bit of your background and why that's really relevant, and then some of your thoughts about, you know, what is the level of rigor and why and when would you use it?
Thank you, Chris. I think it was a very nice session. Always a pleasure listening to Jeremy. So my background is in public health and social science. So I have been trained to, you know, look into the rigor of data, how you evaluate and so on. And in my experience over the years, in the social impact space, I have understood that you can't always have it hard and fast. Sometimes you need to, and like everyone knows, you need to be flexible. Depending on what the situation is, you need to adapt, and it is better to have something than nothing at all. So very well again said that some people do not get into this journey because of the fear of how difficult it's going to be or how much effort it's going to require. But simple things like, you know, how we give an example of market insights. Just go out there, get some data and start somewhere, start with it, and then we'll move forward with it. So I think the rigor of how you're going to go around with depends on what your objective is. And most importantly, how you assess your readiness and your organization's or your take on it. Like, are you ready to go that far? And it's not necessary you need to go all the way till the end. You start with small steps. You could just start with like setting a purpose and setting one activity, and then measure the effect of one activity or one outcome, and then, you know, build it up. And we've done it with multiple organizations, and we see it across as well in the space. So I think the rigor is a choice which someone has to make, taking into consideration different factors. And yeah, you don't have to be hard and fast and go by the textbook rules always. See what fits to you and to your circumstances, but start somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice from you and Jeremy, that concept of starting somewhere and even starting from stories sometimes, even, you know,
yeah.
Stories sometimes are enough for us to help to understand how you think about change and how change happens.
I totally agree. because so many times you can't have a quantifiable data. History has shown us that just one case study helps us understand the an issue, and then you go in deeper and find out more about the issue. So it's always about that first step. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what's also really interesting is thinking about who's the audience
Yes.
for this data. Different audiences are going to have very different levels of expectation, aren't they? And also they're going to adjust those expectations based on where you are on your journey. For organizations that are very early in their journey, funders or people who want to know about your impact are going to be much more lenient and say, okay, well, I understand that you're only been doing this for 6 months, you've only been doing this for a year, or a couple of years. You don't have long-term, longitudinal change data that you can use. One of the things we've at Ākina have been exploring recently with the government is how could we use government data better to help tell some of those stories. So New Zealand's very privileged in that we have fantastic government data and government infrastructure, and the government's working really hard to think about how they can do that. So they've already done some pilots with some not-for-profit organizations in this space, helping people tell that data story, because they recognize that a lot of that data is outside the reach of the individual organizations. How do you look at population level or neighborhood level data to unpick some of this stuff? So I think the other point that I would make is don't feel like all of the data gathering necessarily falls on you as an individual or as an organization. I'm interested to hear, we've got a really great group of people here today, other views that people have on data and sort of rigorousness of data or ideas around just getting started or experiences they've had.
If I can jump in here, hey, it was interesting, when Jeremy talked about just do it, just go and get data, and like you say, like it doesn't matter if it's not perfect, it's a start. You actually talk more about, Chris, you're touching on how important it is for a range of stakeholders in order to tell your stories and engage and find funding and whatever else. It was mostly talking about how that should help you, pivot or adapt your business model or your activities in order to do better. Is there a good example, a social enterprise you worked with recently that has done that really well, like just a very tangible, simple example of starting to get the data and learning straight away from it and adapting, on the back of that? Someone here in the call may want to jump in as well. I don't know if Caroline, you've got a good real example of doing this, but yeah, would be great to just hear like a very recent tangible example of that happening in Aotearoa.
Yes. Hi, kia ora. Hi, everyone. Oh, Helene, you're putting me on the spot. So what we did is when we started, we got a lot of help from Chris over there at Ākina, and he was amazing, and he said all that stuff about just start somewhere. So we're like, okay, well, we'll talk to our the people, our team, right? That's the cleaners we work with, because we're all about increasing the value in cleaning. So that's the financial value that cleaners earn, their sense of well-being, so measuring that and seeing how well respected and they feel by customers, and what's their own sense of self, if they have self-respect, and then well-being of the planet, so that we see that as having value. And then finally, training, which is kind of easy to measure. You can measure like training credits or qualifications gained. So we're actually doing one right now, which is the same way we've always done it. So I've got Lynette in Wellington, she's the manager, she's talking to Roma, the cleaner. She's like, Roma, what's going on in your life at the moment? So she's like, me and my husband and my 8-month-old baby, we're saving for our first house. And so what Lynette's role is to just write that up, to say, what's going on? And then she's flicked it to me this morning, and I'm like, all the stuff I'm interested in is, how much has she saved? Maybe she doesn't want to share that much information specifically, but just where I'm interested, I figure that's what our customers are going to be interested in. Lynette says, I've added in a small piece that anyway, that's too much detail probably. That's enough.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks for sharing that. And I think what's really great about the work that you've done, Caroline, and the work that I think we commonly see with organizations is recognizing that it is an iterative process, that you know, you actually have to have a few goes at this. So the first time you ask for data, you realize, oh, there was a big chunk of data over here that we didn't get, or actually we asked that question, but we're not quite sure whether people answered that question in the same way that we meant to ask it. Those sorts of discoveries. So actually, yeah, knowing that, you know, the first 10 times you do it, you know, every single time you're developing it, and that it's an ongoing process that's never particularly perfect. Sneha, you talked a little bit before, and Ellen, you touched on it as well, this concept of using your data to change and improve and develop. I'm really interested in people's reflections or insights on like what does that process look like in practice? How do you take whatever data you have and think about developing it?
I totally agree with you, Chris. Measuring data is one thing, measuring impact is one thing, but another important aspect is to manage it. So very often what happens is we get stuck in the entire, you know, the world that, oh, we have to measure. But the most important thing is what you do most out of it. Can you use it for informing how you can improve your service, or, you know, advocate for something further, or pitch for more funding, or get better structures into place? You know, just how to be more efficient and effective. I think that is one important thing, so that you can maximize your impact and not just stick to where you are. And I would love to hear like what everyone else has had the experience with this part of the conversation. I don't want to pinpoint anyone yet.
I was just going to comment from like the corporate perspective, and especially being at a bank, we love numbers. So a really good example that we had last year was when we got an invoice from a social enterprise, the cookie project, for an order that we placed. They had a social ROI on their invoice, and they said that our order was 12 hours of work provided. And that, for me, like, I was able to use that as a really good storytelling piece. And I think for me, trying to get more social enterprises used, that's really important. But that was quite simple, but it was really targeted. And that's like, we don't want super in-depth data. Like the little snippets like that are the gold that I can use to get more on.
That's really cool, because like you, even I'm a numbers person, I have a statistical background as well, so I love numbers. But yes, adding a story to it just gives more depth. And like, it's like, okay, you have delivered this, I have made 20 cookies. Yes, probably that's your first step. I would really encourage that you go one step further next time and say, so were those cookies enjoyed? Did people, like, you know, order more, or did they go to different sections of the society or something? It just adds more depth. It informs you better on probably next time we target this area more, or we could do it better. Maybe I'm making chocolate chip cookies, but people over there like peanut butter cookies. So, you know, just even getting simple insights helps you, you know, reach out better or improvise on what you're doing. But yes, I totally agree. Starting somewhere over there and even getting that much data is a very big thing. So congratulations.
I just want to say that is an amazing idea. I just want to say that's an amazing idea, and I'm just putting it in now. So what you said, Olivia, I'm putting it in now. How many hours she's worked? How many hours she's worked on this job towards, you know, her goal of buying the house, and then did they appreciate the fresh desks that we just cleaned? So that's deepening it from you, Sneha. So thank you, guys.
Fantastic, and I think it's definitely about broadening, as you say, Sneha, about how do we go from the hours of employment, which would be sort of this quite a discrete sort of output measure. This is how many hours this is meant for those you know, of employment for those people. But what does that mean for them in their grade?
Totally agree. Sorry, did want to point to the bank, Olivia. I was just an example, yeah. Just following up with your point, Chris, a simple example is like, you know, when we say the number of people who are attending school, you may just report on, like, say 200 people attended the school, but have they really gained any change in skills? Like, have the students really changed in skills? Can they do their math better? Can they apply those skills in real life? It's something which you're aiming for. The aim is not just to set up a building, but to, you know, empower the students, to build them for the future. So that's something important what you'd like to see. And after you understand that, you would know what you can improve, or what can be done better. If there's something missing, maybe they need to improvise on the personality development side, or they need more sports activities. So you add in that way. And that's my experience. I really feel numbers are important, but the same stories can also be said in numbers. And it's important to look into those.
Yeah. Karina, if we've still got you on the call, I'd be really interested in hearing some stories about from when you run your social enterprise, what role measurement played there, especially in the storytelling to corporates, and sort of that core of the work that you did, because I know that you did quite a lot of work on that.
Yeah, hello everyone. I ran a social enterprise probably 5 years ago or so, for about 4 years, and was really focused around environmental causes, saving paper specifically. So we luckily had a little bit of an easy data collection where, you know, every piece of paper that we saved from going to landfill was able to be counted and weighed, and it was really easy to count that. And then we were kind of at the start of our impact journey, and when this impact conversation was starting to become a bit broader in New Zealand, and we worked a bit with Ākina to start to develop that just before we closed down, I suppose. So yeah, we probably didn't quite get to the good stuff, but you know, we had enough data that our clients like Met Service and other government agencies would put the numbers in their annual reports, and they'd love to tell that story about the circular notebook system or paper system that they had going in their organisation. So we had a massive spreadsheet that calculated all of it was for our business management purposes as well. So it was really clearly integrated between, you know, our products being sold and how much impact we were creating, which I think was quite beneficial for us. So yeah, huge spreadsheet, but that's kind of how we did it. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think, as I recall, Karina, you did some calculations out of that around water saved too, didn't you? Yes,
that's right. So we worked out that at that time it was 10 litres of water through the whole life cycle of a production of a piece of paper was about how much it took to make an A4 sheet of paper. So, you know, we had lots of examples of organisations getting rid of reams of 500 sheets of paper because they accidentally misprinted something, or it got a bit jammed in the printer and it was all still blank, but it couldn't be printed again. So we would just get 500 sheets of paper that would otherwise be chucked in the bin, essentially. And that would save about 5,000 litres of water from if they bought a notebook back and turned that into something actually useful again. They would be saving that amount. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Like, just the fact that you told me that, I did not know. It's provided me insight, and I'm going to be very conscious of how I'm doing my printing here for onwards. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. I think it also highlights for me the role that other people's data, other people's research can play within your own data evidence. So, you know, you didn't have to go out and, you know, stand outside the paper factory and measure how much water was going in and going out. There are often, you know, established metrics that people can rely on. You know, obviously within social return on investment, which Sneha can talk a bit more about, you know, you can do custom metrics, but there are also, you know, established ones that you can rely on. So I think that would be the other thing when I think about data, is thinking about, well, how could you use the work that other people have done? How could you think about other data collection or other calculations that you can build on?
I totally agree with you, Chris. I think we live in a world right now, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We all have had experiences. So sharing not only our learnings, but also what we're doing, and specifically data, is very important, because each one of us can pick from that, learn from that, and embed it and use it in our own practice. Just like you mentioned, the social return on investment. I know people obviously sometimes get overwhelmed. Oh my God, how on earth are we going to use values for that? Just to assure you, yes, the Excel sheet looks overwhelming, but there are different ways you can put value to it. And one of the easiest, or one of the most used ways, is you take into account the monetary values which are accounted for the entire world. There's a social value bank whose values you can use. If you do not have access to your stakeholders, or you don't want to go to that rigor. So again, going back to the point of how much rigor you want for your analysis or your measurement is something you assess and see what the circumstances are. So for example, the cost of hospitalization, or what is like the what is the value of being in a hospital or getting access to services, can be something specific to a certain local community, or you can ask the individual itself, how much do you pay, or what is the cost of visiting a service. At the same time, the same thing can be valued in terms of national threshold, like the GP cost is $40, and you could use that as well. So again, it is a part of your preference, what you choose. It's as long as you're disclosing it and it is justified by you and your calculations, it is totally fine, because it is your cohort, your design, and your program. So you are trying to measure and use your data to improvise and maximize your impact. So
fantastic. I'm interested, do we thanks Bruce, you've segued beautifully into, I was going to say, what questions do we have? So Sneha, could you say a bit about the SROI method for measuring value created? What kinds of social enterprises is the methodology most appropriate for?
Thank you, Bruce, for your question. So we have heard about return on investment, right? The amount of financial investment you put in and what is the return. But the social return on investment is one step higher. It looks into not only your financial returns, but also puts a value to the social and environmental benefits reaped from your program. So things which we don't usually value, like the value of having improved confidence, or the value of having someone to trust on or to feel supported, or even simple things of the value of feeling important or feeling heard, is something which is very important in some aspects or some programs. They may be initial steps to meet your long-term goal, but they are important, or some things which are valued most by your stakeholders. So the social return on investment method tries to put a value on these things which are important to your stakeholders. Now, what kind of social enterprises are most appropriate? I would say it fits for anyone. It could go down from a small social enterprise to a large corporate, as well as the funders and government agencies. It all depends on how much rigor you want to put into, what your objective is. So are you doing this for funding? Are you doing this to improvise your service? And what is your readiness? So it can be fit into any kind of environment, and that's the beauty of it, because one of the most important part of the methodology or the framework is to involve your stakeholders. It is about bringing stakeholder voices and what they value most to the table, because at the end of it, we're not delivering, as social entrepreneurs, we're not delivering only for the money. It is also more importantly about the purpose. We're driven by it to create an impact for the people and the community. So yeah, I think it fits in for all. And in my experience, I have worked with all different types of organizations, and I have seen it works well for all.
And Sneha, there are some key principles, right, to social value. Do not overclaim.
Yeah.
I think it'd be really fascinating for people if could you spin through just a couple of those that you think are really relevant to share with people?
Yes. So I don't want to be very theoretical, but I will just outline which are the main ones which people can resonate at once. So the return on investment is basically you are doing it like, just like a ratio or mathematics equation. Whereas SROI is more than just the mathematical equation. It is embedded by social value principles, which are mainly 7, and these the most important ones are, or not most important, the principal 7 are like, you involve your stakeholders and engage with them. So at every step of your process, you're involving your stakeholders, whether it is understanding what matters to them, measuring what matters to them, and feeding back, like what has been derived from it, and sharing the results. Second is that you measure what matters. It's not about going by the outputs. It's about understanding the theory of change, what is being, understanding it and measuring that accordingly. Another important thing is, very often people tell us is that, so you're going to bring up some fancy value, like say 100,000 for the value of this outcome. But no, just to curb that, we have the concept of being material, you account for different filters, like who are the other contributing factors, what would have happened anyway, so that you are more realistic and you're not overclaiming your your benefit. Also, being transparent and verifying result is an important are important principles within the social return on investment framework. So I've not told it by the word, but I've just kind of summarized it that there are 7 principles. So that's just easy for all of us to put into our mind.
Yeah, brilliant. And although we don't do SROI at Ākina, those principles we use through when we're thinking about impact, because they're just really great principles that they make sense intuitively, right?
Yeah.
You can understand them and you can apply them in any kind of situation without having to go too deep. Bruce has asked another great question, and this is a bit of a curly one. So here you go. It's directed again at you, Sneha. How does a social enterprise place a dollar value on the increase in utility created by a positive change in perceptions or feelings? So I guess I think this comes back to your point before, right? Of like, how do we use a dollar as a proxy for some of these really intangible internal aspects that have perhaps some outcomes that come from them, but that are so key to the change?
Thank you, Bruce, again for this brilliant question. I'm glad you're listening to me. Yeah, no one is left off. So yeah, like very often, the reason why you put a monetary value in an SROI is because that becomes an easier way to communicate to your funders, because money is a common way of communication. And if we had it our way, we would just say that, like, this is increasing utility. But sometimes, not sometimes, very often, we have to show what the value is. And financial value is the most important or the most common way of understanding things. Now, say, what is the value of increasing utility because of having better confidence or feeling positive about it? I can give an example. I was doing a social return on investment on a parenting program, and people sometimes are very hesitant to take up the service, but by being on the service, they were able to access other wraparound services. So we did not realize that just being on the program, this is the additional value brought through. So to put a value to it, there are different ways you understand. You first need to understand how much is that outcome important to them. All right. Is it the most important outcome? Maybe the objective of the program was to being a better parent, but for them, it was just getting access to services or utilizing services. So the first aspect is to understand how much value it is to them. The second is to put a financial value to it. The different methods, you can I can go across this more details in the training, but just to say, I can go back to the stakeholder, the FANO or the person utilizing it, and asking, okay, now if you were not on the service and you had to actually get this outcome, what would you do? So they would say, I had to travel this much distance, or I had to pay money to this person, or I had to go time and forth to, get this change. So for example, if you want to access your WINS benefit, by going through a navigation service, they help you bridge that time, and you don't have to go as many times to WINS service as otherwise. So you could see the cost of time for them, the cost of loss of wages. Like sometimes people, if they have to utilize the service, they have to miss the job or take some time out. You could use that as a proxy. Or you could see what is the cost of using that service from the costing database. Like I said, there's a social value bank which provides certain proxies for some universal outcomes. But again, these are based on in UK or USA, and you could contextualize them to New Zealand or the area where you are from. Personally, I'm a fan of going back to the people and asking them, what is this value? What is the value to you? How much would you pay for it? And then put a value to it.
Fantastic, thanks. So Tan, I think we'll hand over you to wrap things up. But thank you, everyone, and thank you to Sneha for being part of this with me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks to you all.